The nurse places the surgical consent form in front of me on a cold, silver tray. The paper feels heavy, like it carries the weight of my entire life. "Emergency contact?" she asks gently, her pen hovering over the blank line. I look at the space where a name should be and feel a hollow ache in my chest. I whisper, "I don't have one." It is a pathetic admission for a 30-year-old woman, but it is the truth. Across the waiting room, my husband, Marcus, scrolls through his phone. He hasn't looked up once since we checked in. He is leaning back, looking bored, as if we are waiting for a car oil change instead of my life-threatening surgery. Next to him sits his mother, Beatrice. She doesn't even try to lower her voice. She mutters loudly enough for the other patients to hear. If she hadn't been so dramatic about her little pains, we wouldn't be here wasting a whole Saturday. I feel the sting of her words, but Marcus says nothing to defend me. He just sighs and taps his screen. I realize then that in this crowded hospital, I am completely and utterly on my own. The nurse points to the section regarding surgical complications. I look over at Marcus, hoping for a sign of comfort. Instead, he checks his watch and groans. "Just sign it, Clara," he says with a wave of his hand. "People get surgery every day. You're making a scene by stalling." No hand held mine. No reassurance was offered. Just pure, cold irritation. My fingers tremble as I grip the pen. I am signing a form that could authorize my death, and my own husband is annoyed by the timing. My heart pounds against my ribs. The nurse asks one last question, her voice full of pity. "Is there anyone at all you want us to call, if something happens?" I start to shake my head, the tears finally blurring my vision. But before I can say no, a deep, steady voice answers from the hallway. "Call me." I freeze. I haven't heard that voice in 15 years. I turn my head slowly, and there he is. My father, Julian, stands in the doorway. He looks older, with grey at his temples, but his eyes are exactly as I remember. Why is the man who abandoned me suddenly here? Shock turns into white-hot anger. I haven't seen Julian since I was 15 years old. To me, he was just a ghost who walked out and never looked back. He walks into the room, looking steady and controlled. Beatrice stands up immediately, her face twisted in a scowl. "Family only," she snaps, trying to block his path. Julian doesn't even flinch. He looks her right in the eye and replies calmly, "I am her family." Marcus looks confused, finally putting his phone away. "Wait, that's your father?" he asks. I never told Marcus the full story because it hurt too much to talk about. I believed my father chose a new life over me. I believed he didn't care. Yet, here he is, looking at me with a strange intensity. He doesn't look like a man who doesn't care. He walks past Marcus and hands the nurse a thick blue folder. "I've already spoken with the lead surgeon, Dr. Eris," he says. My jaw drops. How could he have spoken to my surgeon? He lives halfway across the country, and we haven't spoken in over a decade. Julian begins asking the medical team incredibly precise questions. He doesn't ask if I'll be okay or if I'm scared. He asks about the specific risks of the anesthesia, the exact staffing levels for the afternoon shift, and the surgical backup protocols. He isn't being emotional. He is being strategic. He sounds like a general preparing for a major battle. I watch in silence as the atmosphere in the room shifts. The nurses, who were previously acting like this was a routine day, suddenly stand up straighter. Even the surgeon, who enters the room a moment later, treats me differently. He is more attentive and far more cautious. Beatrice whispers to Marcus. Who does he think he is? Some kind of king. The surgeon overhears her and responds firmly. This man is the reason the hospital board insisted I review this case personally. My head spins. The hospital board? I am a simple office manager. Why would the board care about my surgery? I look at Julian, trying to see past the stranger he has become. Who exactly is my father? While I am being wheeled toward a different desk to sign the final financial paperwork, Marcus follows, muttering under his breath. "Good thing your father showed up and acted like a big shot," he says, leaning in close so only I can hear. "Because our insurance barely covers this procedure. We're going to be in debt for years because of your health." I flinch at his words. Barely covers it. Marcus had told me weeks ago that everything was handled and the insurance was top tier. The billing coordinator at the desk looks up from her computer, her expression awkward. She clears her throat and adds quietly, "Actually, there were several declined payments on the primary account over the last 2 months." My heart stops. I look at Marcus, whose face turns a bright, guilty red. "It was a technical error," he hisses. But I see the truth in his eyes. He had been gambling with my health, letting the premiums slide while I was suffering in pain. He didn't want the surgery not because he thought I was dramatic, but because he had spent the money on something else. A nurse comes by to check my vitals one last time before I move to the surgical bay. She leans down and whispers, "It's very fortunate you came in today, honey. Another delay could have been fatal." That blockage was moving. I feel a chill go down my spine. A fatal delay. For the last 3 weeks, I had been begging Marcus to take me to the doctor. Every time, he insisted we wait a few weeks, until his next bonus came in. He told me I was overreacting. He told me it was just a stomach ache. He was willing to let me die just to save his pride or his bank account. I look across the room at Julian. He is watching Marcus carefully. He isn't shouting or making a scene. He is just observing, like a man measuring an opponent before a fight. He sees through Marcus. He sees the lies. I feel a wave of shame washing over me for staying with a man who valued money more than my breathing. The hospital staff moved me to a private pre-op room. For a brief moment, Marcus and Beatrice are told to stay in the waiting area. Julian follows me in. He sits on the edge of the plastic chair, his hands folded. He looks at me softly and asks, "Did the pain get worse recently, Clara?" I nod slowly, unable to find my voice. He closes his eyes briefly, and I see a flicker of genuine grief cross his face. It is the first time he has shown any emotion. "I told them this might happen," he whispers. My eyebrows knit together. Told who? How could he have known about my internal medical issues? He hasn't been in my life. He didn't know Michael, he didn't know my house, and he certainly shouldn't have known my medical records. How long has he been watching my life from a distance? Was he always there, hidden in the shadows of my years, while I thought I was an orphan of a living parent? The minutes before the surgery are ticking away. The clock on the wall seems to be moving faster and faster. Julian leans forward and says something that fractures my entire reality. "I never abandoned you, Clara." I feel a surge of bitterness. "You left," I say, my voice cracking. "Mom said you chose another woman. She said you didn't want a daughter holding you back." Julian shakes his head slowly, his expression pained. "I was kept away by every legal wall your mother could build," he says. "I fought for years, but she made sure you only heard her version of the story." My mother had always painted him as the villain, the man who vanished into the night. But looking at him now, I see a man who has been carrying a heavy burden. Why would she lie so completely? Why would she make me believe I wasn't loved? My world is shifting, and the ground I thought was solid is turning into sand. Julian reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He presses it into my hand, his fingers warm against my cold skin. "Open it after the surgery," he says firmly. "Not before. You need to focus on breathing right now." I grip the envelope tightly. I can feel the bulk of papers inside. Later, I would find out they were childhood court filings, stacks of blocked visitation requests, and letters returned to sender, unopened. Every single document was signed or stamped by my mother. She hadn't just moved on, she had actively erased him from my existence. She had stolen my father from me and replaced him with a lie. I realized that my entire past is a carefully constructed fiction. Every holiday I spent wondering why he didn't call was a holiday where he was likely sitting by a phone that she had disconnected. The betrayal is so large I can't even process it. The orderlies come to wheel my gurney toward the operating theater. As I am moving through the double doors, I overhear Marcus whispering to Beatrice in the hallway. They think I can't hear them over the noise of the hospital. "If something happens," Marcus mutters, his voice low and greedy, "the apartment becomes mine automatically. The life insurance is through her work, so it should be a clean payout." My stomach drops, but not from the illness. It is the cold realization of his logistics. He isn't worried about my recovery. He is calculating my death like a real estate transaction. He is already thinking about ownership and payouts. I see Julian standing a few feet away. He hears it too. I see his jaw tighten, his muscles tensing as if he wants to strike Marcus down. But he stays still, his eyes fixed on me, promising me with his gaze that he won't let that happen. Just as we reach the doors of the surgical suite, chaos erupts. Julian steps forward and physically halts the surgical team. "Stop," he says, his voice booming with authority. "I want a second specialist present. Dr. Miller should be on his way down." The head surgeon stops and looks at Julian. I expect him to be angry at the interruption, but he isn't. He nods instantly. "Yes, sir. We will wait for Dr. Miller to scrub in." Again, I see that incredible respect and influence. This isn't just a father showing up. This is someone with immense power. He isn't just a businessman. He is someone the hospital answers to. I realize then that he didn't just show up because he was worried. He showed up because he knew exactly what kind of danger I was in, and he knew exactly how to fix it. He is my silent guardian, finally revealing himself when the stakes are highest. The anesthesia begins to take hold. The world turns fuzzy and the lights above me start to spin. I feel a mask being placed over my face. I hear the steady beep of the monitors. I am terrified, but as I drift off into the darkness, the last thing I see is Julian's face through the window of the door. He is standing guard. Mid-surgery, things go wrong. I would later learn that I began to bleed out. There was unexpected structural damage that the initial scans had missed. The first surgeon hesitated, but the backup specialist Julian insisted on took over. He saved my life. He knew exactly how to handle the complication because he had reviewed my history more thoroughly than anyone else. If Julian hadn't pushed for that second doctor, I wouldn't have made it off that table. He didn't just show up to watch. He showed up to save me. Waking up feels like pulling my body out of deep, thick mud. My head is heavy, and my throat is dry. The first face I see as my eyes flicker open is Julian's. He has bright red eyes, as if he hasn't blinked in hours. He is sitting right next to my bed, holding a cup of water with a straw. "I'm here, Clara," he whispers. I look around the recovery room. It is quiet and dim. "Where is Marcus?" I ask, my voice a tiny raspy thread. Julian's expression hardens. "He had to step out," Julian says. I find out later that Marcus left for 5 hours during the most critical part of my surgery. He told the nurses he was going to get a real meal, because hospital food was depressing. He wasn't there when the doctors came out to say I almost died. He wasn't there when I took my first breath of air after the ventilator. My father was. The next morning, I am more alert, though still in pain. I overhear Julian on the phone in the corner of my private room. He thinks I am asleep. "No," he says into the receiver, his voice cold and final. "She won't be returning to that house. Have the team begin the inventory. I want every single item she owns moved by Monday." My heart leaps. Returning. He is making decisions for me, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel crowded or controlled. I feel relieved. I feel like someone has finally stepped in to stop the drowning. He is building a wall between me and the people who tried to hurt me. Who gave him that right? Technically, no one. But he is taking it anyway, and I realize I've been waiting my whole life for someone to care enough to be this protective. A hospital administrator enters the room later that afternoon. She looks nervous and carries several folders. She starts to apologize profusely. "Ms. Brooks, we are so sorry for the confusion earlier regarding the billing," she says. She looks at Julian with a mix of fear and admiration. All costs for the surgery, the private suite, and the specialists have been fully covered. I look at Marcus, who has finally returned, looking rumpled and annoyed. He goes pale, his mouth hanging open. "Covered? By who?" he asks, his voice high and shaky. Julian doesn't even look at him. He keeps his eyes on me. "By me," Julian says. "The entire balance is 0. You don't owe this hospital, or this man, a single cent." Marcus looks like he's been slapped. He realizes his leverage over me, the debt he was going to use to keep me trapped, has vanished into thin air. Julian waits until Marcus is sent out to get more paperwork before he sits by my bed again. He looks tired, but his gaze is sharp. He quietly reveals that he didn't just show up by accident. He had investigated Marcus months ago after receiving an anonymous tip. He discovered the massive debt Marcus had accumulated. He found the hidden loans taken out in my name without my knowledge. He saw a clear, terrifying pattern. Marcus had a history of marrying financially stable women, draining their accounts, and leaving when they became a burden. My blood runs cold. I wasn't a wife to him. I was an investment. I was a bank account with a heartbeat. Julian had been watching this play out, waiting for the right moment to intervene without pushing me away. He knew that if he told me months ago, I wouldn't have believed him. He had to wait for the mask to slip. Who warned you? I ask, my voice stronger now. I need to know who saw the truth when I was so blind to it. Julian hesitates for a second, then sighs. Your neighbor, Mrs. Gable, he says. I remember her. She was a quiet older woman who always watched us from her porch. She had once stopped me in the driveway and asked if I was safe. I had laughed it off, thinking she was just being nosy. But she had heard the yelling. She had seen Marcus taking boxes out of the house when I wasn't home. She had seen the way Beatrice treated me like a servant. She didn't have my father's number, but she had found his business through an old alumni magazine I had accidentally left in the recycling bin. She reached out because she knew I was drowning. The next day, Julian brings in a laptop. There's something you need to see, he says. He plays security footage from the hospital hallway. It was recorded while I was in the operating room, fighting for my life. The video shows Marcus and Beatrice arguing with the billing coordinator. Marcus isn't crying or pacing. He is red-faced and shouting about how inconvenient the surgical costs are. He is caught on camera saying, if she's going to be a vegetable, I'm not paying for the long-term care. Something inside me hardens into diamond. The last of my love for him shatters. There are no tears left. There is only a terrifying, cold clarity. I see him for exactly what he is, a monster in a cheap suit. I look at my father and nod. I am ready to do whatever it takes to get away. Julian finally explains the full story about my mother. He tells me how she feared losing financial control after their divorce. My father had been successful, and she wanted to ensure that any money meant for me went through her first. To do that, she had to make me hate him. She told me he chose another family so I wouldn't try to find him. She intercepted his letters and returned his checks to make him look like a deadbeat. But he never stopped trying. He shows me a digital folder on the laptop. It contains graduation photos of me he had hired photographers to take from the back of the crowd. It has my career updates and even photos of my first apartment. He had been celebrating my milestones from the shadows for 15 years. He never stopped being my father. He just had to be a ghost to keep the peace. During my recovery over the next week, Julian doesn't smother me. He doesn't tell me what to do or how to feel. He simply empowers me. He brings me legal documents and says, decide what your next life looks like, Clara. I have the resources to make it happen, but you have to be the one to sign the papers. This isn't a rescue where I am a damsel in distress. It is a partnership of respect. For the first time in my adult life, I feel supported instead of managed. I feel like a person instead of a pawn. I spend hours talking to him, filling in the gaps of the last 15 years. We aren't strangers anymore. We are two people who were robbed of each other, finally taking back what belongs to us. One afternoon, Marcus storms into the room, demanding gratitude. He is angry because he found out Julian is moving my things. I stayed by your side, he yells, pointing a finger at my chest. I was here every day. You owe me for the stress you put me through. I look at him calmly, my heart rate not even speeding up. You stayed for the inheritance you thought was coming, I responded. The room goes dead silent. The truth detonates like a bomb. Marcus's face turns a sickly shade of white. He tries to stammer a denial, but the words die in his throat. Julian doesn't intervene. He stands by the window, letting me stand on my own 2 feet. He lets me be the one to end it. I tell Marcus to leave and never come back. I tell him the locks have already been changed. I filed for legal separation and a restraining order the very next day. Julian offers me his best lawyers and a place to stay, but he doesn't pressure me to move in with him. You choose the pace, he says. If you want your own place, we find you your own place. The power has shifted fully into my hands. I realize that Marcus was only powerful because I was weak and isolated. Now that I have a giant standing behind me, Marcus looks like the small, pathetic man he truly is. He tries to call, he tries to text, he tries to guilt-trip me through Beatrice, but I block them all. I am done being a victim. I am done being an investment. A week later, Marcus learns the final crushing truth. He thought he could at least stay in the apartment, but he discovers it was solely in my name. My father had helped me buy it years ago through an anonymous trust one didn't even know existed. Marcus had no legal right to the property. When he finds out, his rage exposes everything. He sends a flurry of nasty emails to my work, trying to get me fired. He screams at the moving crew. His mask doesn't just slip. It shatters into 1,000 pieces. Everyone sees the manipulation, the resentment, and the entitlement. He loses his friends, his reputation, and his investment all in one weekend. He is left with nothing but his debts. The story of Marcus's behavior spreads. Mutual friends discover the security footage and the stories of him complaining about my surgery being inconvenient. The support floods toward me. People I haven't talked to in years reach out to apologize for not seeing the signs. Isolation finds Marcus and Beatrice. They are cast out of our social circle, not because of some dramatic revenge I planned, but because the truth was enough. I realize that I don't need to be mean to get even. I just need to be healthy and honest. The world has a way of balancing itself out when the light is finally turned on. Before I leave the hospital, I ask Julian the one question that has been burning in my mind. Why come now? Why not 5 years ago? Why wait for a surgery? He takes my hand and looks me in the eyes. Because the moment I learned your life was at risk, staying away was no longer protecting you, he says. I realized that my silence was allowing you to be hurt by someone else. I would rather you hate me for showing up than have you die because I stayed away. It wasn't abandonment. It was a sacrifice. It was misguided, rooted in a desire to avoid more legal drama for me as a child. But it was love. Months later, I am fully healed. I have a new home, new boundaries, and a new life. I host a small dinner in my new dining room. Across the table sits Julian. He isn't a ghost anymore. He is a constant. He raises a glass of sparkling water and smiles. To second chances, he says. I realize something quietly profound as I look at him. I went into that surgery believing I was completely alone in the world. I thought I was unloved and disposable. But I walked out with the family I was always meant to have. The man I thought abandoned me was the one who refused to let me die. I am finally home.